1140 hours of funded early learning and childcare. What action has been taken to address parental concerns about flexibility and choice in the system?
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Flexibility and choice are fundamental to our offer of 1140 hours of funded ELC for all 3- and 4-year-olds. As well as eligible 2-year-olds. The latest ELC census reported uptake by 3- and 4-year-old remains near universal, with a recent survey showing that 90% of parents and carers were satisfied that they'd been offered the flexibility to use funded hours in a way that met their families' need. We know there is more to do, and we will consider how best to ensure childcare offers the flexibility that families need as we develop our plans to expand provision.
Catherine Sangster.
Thank you for that answer. One of my constituents in Dander Hall has gotten in touch about their difficulties of securing a funded place that's convenient for their working and living arrangements. The only option available to them would mean crossing the infamous Sheriff Hall roundabout 4 times a day. My constituent does need a solution now, not in years to come. So can the Minister reassure my constituent that action will be taken now to resolve the inflexibility in the current system and not wait until we start to expand further?
Minister.
Yes, I'm not sure of your individual constituents' situation there, or if it is indeed cross local authority, perhaps. And this is one of the issues I know that was raised recently in the child care debate several weeks ago. I'm happy to take that on. As we said, we are still working, and we would hope that local authorities moving forward would also work together to ensure that parents and families can get the child care that they need.
Question 9, Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what further assessment it has made of any impact on the environment following the granting of planning consent for the Berwick Bank offshore wind farm in light of the significant updates and changes to guidance and regulations since consent was granted.
Cabinet Secretary Ivan McKee.
Scottish Ministers comprehensively examined this application, and the decision to grant consent in July 2025 was taken after careful consideration of the project's potential environmental impact and potential impact on other users of the sea. It is a requirement of the consent that the developer must deliver compensation to address the environmental impacts of this wind farm, alongside measures which will mitigate and minimise impact to other sea users. The Scottish Ministers will consider any application to vary the Section 36 consent in line with current regulations.
Miles Briggs.
I thank Cabinet Secretary for that answer. In his response to me this week, the Cabinet Secretary states that SSE Renewables will compensate for any predicted adverse impacts. In their own impact assessment, projections for the development could kill 4,000 gannets, guillemots, kilowatts, puffins and razorbills every year, and ministers seem to accept that as an acceptable cost. So how does the Cabinet Secretary intend to keep this under constant review, and how will potential ongoing negative environmental impacts be reported to this Parliament?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Energy Act, obviously, that controls this, and the Scottish Government has worked collaboratively with the UK Government over the last few years to reform aspects of the habitat regulations for wind, with the dual purpose of enabling a more flexible approach to securing compensatory measures and maximising opportunities for investment. And the Scottish Government is working at pace on the Scottish statutory guidance, following a period of stakeholder engagement on draft guidance, and aim to publish this as soon as possible. This provided practical guidance on how the regulations for offshore wind in Scotland with regards to compensation operate.
Question 10, Daniel Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the commissioning of a new pre-hospital critical care service for Edinburgh and the east of Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Ambulance Service have deployed a business case for a new pre-hospital critical care service for Edinburgh and the east of Scotland, which will be considered under the new NHS sub-national planning structures for consideration. It is the responsibility of NHS boards to make appropriate operational decisions to ensure a high level of quality of emergency medical care for the members of their communities.
Daniel Johnson.
I thank the Minister for that answer, but it's been 2 years since the Medic One helicopter was grounded. Since then, the Scottish Trauma Audit Group state that just 3% of the population in Edinburgh and the south east of Scotland receive life-saving advanced pre-hospital care. The comparative figure for Glasgow and the West is 32%. That's a tenfold difference. The business case was 9 months late, has been on ministerial desks since March. So when will we get a decision about this life-saving service for Edinburgh and the whole of the east of Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I very much appreciate the member's interest in this. I know that he has asked a number of questions in this very specific area, as have other members of this chamber. He is correct to say that the business case was submitted in March this year. This business case was actually requested in 2023 and it has only now been submitted. As I said in my original answer, this will be a matter for the Subnational Planning Board, because they are best placed to make this decision, because the decision has to be consistent with the needs of the population based, and the planning needs to take place across NHS and territorial boundaries. So this is a very important piece of work, and he will of course recall the quite long history in this matter, which I have looked into, that this was a decision taken by NHS Lothian back in 2024, and it was a decision that neither consulted Scottish Government nor indeed the Scottish Trauma Network. But my expectations remain the same, that NHS boards all have to ensure that high level of emergency medical care for their communities.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes general questions for today. The next item of business is First Minister's questions for party leaders. The first question will be asked by Anna Sarwar.
You caught me off guard there, sorry, Presiding Officer, by starting 30 seconds early, so I apologise. Can I start by wishing the Scotland team and the Tartan Army the best of luck as the World Cup kicks off later today? I'm sure the one thing that unites us all in this chamber is our support for Steve Clarke and the Scotland team. And, Presiding Officer, speaking of unity, I, like many, was horrified and angered by the knife attack in Belfast. Justice must be done and lessons must be learnt. But there is never any justification for that to turn into violence, racism and disorder on our streets. Those being intimidated on our streets or in our places of worship, whether that be a mosque, a synagogue or any other faith centre, must hear loudly and clearly from us all that this is not who we are, those who seek to divide us do not speak for us, and that Scotland belongs to us all. And, Presiding Officer, when we have a rising challenge of disillusionment and mistrust of our politics and our institutions, does the First Minister agree that rebuilding and restoring that trust is a responsibility on all of us who want to see the politics of hatred defeated?
First Minister.
Professor, let me begin first of all on the question of the World Cup, and I associate myself directly with the comments that Mr Sarwar has made. I look forward enormously later on after question time to travelling to Boston to support Scotland in Boston on Saturday evening, and I extend my warmest wishes to Steve Clarke, to Andy Robertson and to the whole of the Scotland men's team who have done Scotland proud in getting to the World Cup, and we look forward enormously to their success. To contribute to the occasion, I decided to wear my No Scotland, No Party tie to First Minister's question time today, so hopefully that will bring some good cheer to the team at the weekend. On the serious issue that Mr Sarwar raises about disorder, I agree 100% with what he said. There is a rising tide of the spread of hateful rhetoric in our society, and it is inciting people to behave in a reckless and aggressive and thuggish fashion in our society. This is a peaceful country. Scotland is a welcoming country, and I will exercise the leadership, as I know Mr Sarwar will do, to make sure that Scotland always remains a tolerant, welcoming and inclusive country.
Question 2, Anna Sarwar.
I thank the First Minister for that response and wish him well on his travels, and wish even more that Scotland gets the results it needs at the World Cup. On the issue of trust, last night the SNP voted down an inquiry into the lessons and implications of Operation Branchfarm and the conviction of Peter Murrell. The reason given was that the SNP believed that this was an attempt by political rivals to investigate the inner workings of another political party. As I made clear yesterday, that is not my intention. The crimes of Peter Murrell are for Peter Murrell, but there are issues raised that go beyond the internal workings of the SNP. There are legitimate questions for Police Scotland, the Crown Office, the Lord Advocate, the Electoral Commission, HMRC and others like the Scottish Legal Aid Board on why a wealthy man who owns property abroad and says he has the means to immediately pay back £400,000 had access to legal aid. Scots demand answers to these valid questions. So John Swinney says he wants to avoid an inquiry into the inner workings of the SNP. I agree. So will he work cross-party to agree the terms of reference, the scope and remit of any parliamentary inquiry before supporting any such inquiry?
First Minister.
Sir, if that was an attempt by Mr Sarwar to put some order and clarity into his position, it was absolutely necessary. Because anyone listening to the incoherent gibberish that Jackie Bailey came out with on the radio this morning in trying to defend the Labour position knows that Labour has just been trying to score grubby political points over this whole issue for weeks, and they should be ashamed of themselves. We've gone through a process where my party is the victim of an embezzlement, and that is a criminal case that has been researched by Police Scotland, put in front of the Crown and a successful prosecution obtained. That is what has happened in this particular case. I do not believe there is a case for an independent inquiry or a parliamentary inquiry into that issue, because that has been done by the police and no organisation can do the issue or take that issue forward in a more sophisticated way than a police investigation. And Mr Sarwar should leave it at that.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, I'm not asking us to get into the inner workings of the police relating to the investigation of Operation Branchfarm. I'm talking about the institutions in this country and the legitimate questions. Now, following on from the letter from the Government this morning, I have written to the Electoral Commission saying that we will support and engage in any review into party finances. But this is about Operation Branchfarm and the lessons and implications from it. This was an investigation into the governing party of Scotland. It would further undermine public trust and confidence and our democracy if the governing party now blocks any attempt to look at the lessons and implications of that investigation and subsequent convictions. Rebuilding trust is on all of us. So that's why, Presiding Officer, I have today written to all political parties, asking them to meet and start the work of agreeing a terms of reference and a scope of any potential inquiry. This should be a process that the SNP and the Greens are willing to engage with in good faith. Governance of the SNP is for John Swinney and the SNP, but scrutiny of government and our institutions is for Parliament and for parliamentarians. In fact, that is our duty. So can I ask John Swinney, is he prepared to confront a culture of secrecy and cover-up and put country before party by agreeing the terms of a meaningful inquiry?
First Minister.
What does Mr Sarwar think we're engaged in just now? This is scrutiny. I'm here to answer questions twice a week in front of Parliament, as are all of my ministers on a regular basis, to have government under scrutiny. Mr Sarwar keeps on saying he doesn't want an internal investigation into the SNP. That's exactly what he's just made the case for, and that was a case that failed in Parliament yesterday. Mr Sarwar is going to have to accept the democratic outcomes that take their course. The first one he's going to have to accept is that Parliament rejected the arguments that Mr Sarwar is putting forward yesterday.
First Minister, if you're asking a question, do the courtesy of the First Minister in the Chamber of letting him answer the question that you yourself have asked. Thank you. First Minister.
Presiding Officer, Mr Sarwar is setting out an argument which is about examining a case which Parliament rejected yesterday democratically. That was what Parliament decided. And the other democratic outcome that Mr Sarwar is going to have to come to terms with is the outcome of the election. When all of these issues that were put about by Mr Sarwar, he would come to Parliament week after week and issue all of the comments, smearing his opponents, smearing me, smearing my government, smearing the SNP, and the people decided to send fewer Labour MSPs to this Parliament as a consequence of the election. So I would simply say to Mr Sarwar, it's time he acknowledged the failure of his strategy to hold this government to account, and he should come up with a better strategy than the one he's pursuing.
Malcolm Offord.
Let me start by adding my best wishes and sending our best of luck to the Scotland team in America. Let's hope they get to the last 16 for the first time since 1974. So, in PMQs, Reform Scotland will continue to focus on the issues that matter most to voters in Scotland, which are that energy costs are too high, taxes are too high and immigration is too high. Therefore, at this, my third FMQs, I wish to focus on immigration.
I would remind you that immigration is a reserved matter and not under the remit of the First Minister.
There is a specific Scottish matter I want to raise in relation to immigration, which is going to explain now. So thousands of the immigrants who arrive illegally in the UK when granted leave to remain there then come specifically to Scotland, presenting as homeless, because local authorities here have less discretion than in England about how they allocate accommodation. Now, as a result, councils across Scotland are being forced to indefinitely pause the allocation of permanent accommodation to local Scots who have been on social housing waiting lists, in some cases for years, in order to provide temporary accommodation to the new arrivals instead. So my question to the First Minister is, will he now restore to Scottish local authorities their powers to put local Scots first?
First Minister.
President, I think Mr Offord is under a misconception about the local connection rules, because the local connection rules that were changed by this government in 2022 did not change local connection rules for refugee households. The local connection rules in relation to refugee households have been in place for, I would think, in excess of 20 years in the current context. So Mr Offord is just fundamentally wrong in the point that he puts to me. But there is a deeper point that is exposed by the question that Mr Offord puts to me. And that is that Mr Offord is trying to pursue an issue on immigration at the same time as his party is associated with the stirring up of hatred within our society. And I just want to call it out for what it is, because during the election campaign I made it abundantly clear I would not cooperate with reform in this Parliament because of the way in which they pursue this issue, which incites racial hatred in our society. I'm glad I took that stance in the election, and I'm determined to sustain it during this Parliament.
Malcolm Offord. We only take points of order on FMQs at the end of First Minister's questions.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. So, the First Minister has not answered my question, and instead he's thrown false accusations at my party. Let me address direct the terrible riots we've seen in Belfast. First, to condemn the brutal and unprovoked attack on Stephen Ogilvie. Second, to echo his family in saying that violent protest is not the answer. Whatever is the problem, violence is not the answer. But that is not to ignore the problem. The reality is there's a very real problem with immigration, which was created by the Tories and now exacerbated by Labour. Weak politicians have created this unrest in our society, and if we the politicians don't fix it democratically, other less savoury actors will fill that vacuum. So, in Scotland, in Scotland, will the First Minister now take immediate action to restore the priority need for local Scots for scarce housing resources, to give priority to local Scots ahead of strangers?
First Minister.
I'd simply point out to Malcolm Offord in relation to his question that the problem that was created by the Conservatives, in his words, was by a Conservative party of which he was a member and a serving government minister. So it stretches incredulity for Mr Offord to come here and present himself as some form of a solution to a problem that he allegedly, in his own words, created in the first place. Now, I want to explore some of the comments that Mr Offord has said to me about the issues around about protest, because I fear that the issues around less savoury characters are not too far from home. On Tuesday, there was disorder in the streets of Scotland, and particularly in the city of Glasgow, which I unreservedly condemn, and I condemned it yesterday. At the same time as I was condemning it, Thomas Kerr, sitting beside Mr Offord, was saying to people that it was important that people went out and protested last night. At the same time, I was making it abundantly clear that nobody in the current context, although they've got democratic rights, nobody should be out protesting last night, given the climate that we're in. That was my advice for people not to protest. Mr Kerr said people should get out and protest. And what happened last night? Well, in Greenock, a town very close to Mr Offord's heart, I know that, police officers were attacked. 2 officers sustained minor injuries and damage was caused to police vehicles as the police were simply doing their duty of protecting the citizens of our country, and Mr Offord should condemn his colleague Thomas Kerr right now.
Malcolm Offord. Let Mr Offord speak.
Presiding Officer, let me say once again, unequivocally, that we condemn violence. Violence is not the way to protest, but protest is a valid mechanism to make one's views heard in frustration. Thomas Kerr was very, very clear yesterday in the interviews he gave that there was no line to cross into violence, but a right to protest remains valid. And Thomas Kerr says this as a local Glaswegian. And we know, for example, the FOI in the Times recently showed that Glasgow has become home to 20 refugees per week in the last year, with the vast majority being fighting-age men from undisclosed, with undisclosed.
Excuse me, let him finish.
Presiding Officer, with undisclosed nationality, and that is unsustainable. We all agree that sensibly, but sadly not surprising, because it was the First Minister who was wearing a T-shirt saying "I welcome refugees" while advocating open borders. First Minister, we can't have this. These are the consequences. We're asking you to reapply local connection rules, which you can do, to help alleviate the pressures on this big issue, social housing. It will rebalance the system once again to put our own people first. Now, the SNP and every other party in this chamber have championed mass uncontrolled immigration. Reform Scotland does not. So I ask the First Minister one last time, will he please immediately introduce the priority need and local connection rule to our housing system and finally put Scotland first?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I think what Parliament and the country has just heard for the first time in this parliamentary session is exactly what I was warning about during the election campaign. Because the language that's been used about strangers, about creating division between people who walk the same streets of our country. On Tuesday night, Police Scotland issued a statement which indicated that officers responded to disorder and violence, including incidents in Glasgow, where members of the public were attacked because of the colour of their skin. Now, people, and it also goes on to say, officers were also attacked. Now, Members of the public will ask, how on earth, and they say this to me when I'm out and about in the country, how has Scotland become like this? Well, Scotland has become like this because people over on that side of this chamber, Malcolm Offord, Thomas Kerr, various others, are inciting racial division in our society, and this government will stand up to all of that.
OK, members, thank you. Settle down. Gillian Mackay.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. And could I follow others in wishing Steve Clark, the Scotland's Men team and the Tartan Army a safe and productive journey in the US. The racist violence we've seen on the streets of Belfast, as well as in Glasgow and elsewhere in Scotland this week, have been utterly shameful. People were trapped inside the Glasgow Central Mosque and the St Enoch Centre, sheltering there for their own safety. Others were attacked in the street because of the colour of their skin, while mobs shouted, "Send them home," at children because they weren't white. Nobody should be made to feel unsafe on our streets, and it's horrific that so many people have been. There are no so-called legitimate concerns which can justify this kind of hateful action. So what will the First Minister do? To provide reassurances to people and communities who are worried about their safety and that of their loved ones?
First Minister.
President Officer, one of the fundamental duties, if not the fundamental duty of ministers, is to ensure that people are safe in their own country. And that is the approach taken forward in all of the communications that the government takes forward. We set out prior to Christmas, and I intend to revisit this question again, the merits of the We Are Scotland campaign, the one that communicates and supports the advantages of multiculturalism within our society, but in the light of recent events, I intend to revisit that campaign to ensure that its messages are heard. They were heard loudly and clearly in the run-up to Christmas, but I want to make sure that is the case. But then also that Police Scotland are active in supporting individual communities. I know, because I've heard from the Jewish community, I've heard from the Muslim community, the degree to which they feel they have good and strong connections with Police Scotland, and they feel Police Scotland are responsive to their concerns. And they must always feel that our police forces are responsive to their concerns. And I assure Gillian Mackay, and I think this was demonstrated by Police Scotland on Tuesday evening, that the force and the advantage of being a single force has the capacity to deploy formidable resources to ensure that members of the public are kept safe when these actions take place. And we must at all times be vigilant to ensure that we have those resources in place to ensure community safety.
Gillian Mackay.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. This is a time when our Parliament must stand together to condemn racists and fascists who seek to divide our communities. And I am heartened by most of the response we've seen so far this afternoon. Yet the National has revealed today that an active member of Reform UK, who attended the election count in Glasgow alongside their deputy leader in Scotland, not only took part in the racist scenes on Buchanan Street, but boasted that he would do so again. Last year, this man, who's clearly a friend of Reform UK's leadership, wrote, and I quote, "Jews are forcing us to swallow hordes of migrants, flooding land with the dregs of the world to dilute our Protestant stock and shatter the Union." It makes me feel sick just quoting that. But as we've seen this afternoon, this is a party that's consistently branded New Scots as strangers, attacked Glaswegian school children who speak more than one language, and scapegoated and demonised our migrant communities. What does the First Minister have to say to those on the Reform benches who have fanned the flames of hate and actively welcomed racist and anti-Semitic members?
First Minister.
President, I have seen the comments to which Gillian Mackay refers, and I'm horrified by their contents. I think they are the worst of the communication in our society in the demonising of individuals. And as I have made clear in my response already to Malcolm Offord, I deplore the way in which Reform is stirring up this division within our society, their association with individuals that are creating that division, and who are also involved, it appears from what I've read in the newspapers today, the disorder that we have seen on the streets of our country is no place for democratic politicians to be associated with. And I would say to Reform, they should establish the strongest possible distance from that rhetoric and from the behaviour of these individuals, or they will forever be known as the people that incited racial tension within our society in Scotland.
Gillian Mackay.
The violence this week has been stirred up by an online landscape which is designed to promote hate, and by social media algorithms which deliver fascist propaganda into people's news feeds 24 hours a day. The world's richest man, Elon Musk, used his personally owned social media platform to share abhorrent content, including quotes calling for millions and millions to be deported from the UK, along with adverts for these protests. This is a direct threat to the safety of communities across our country, and it cannot go unchallenged. Online regulation is largely reserved to Westminster, but there is one area this Parliament does have control over. So will the First Minister work with the Scottish Greens to class social media platforms as publishers when the content they show you is the result of their algorithm rather than your choices as a user? That way we can finally start to take action on hateful and misleading online content.
First Minister.
I'm very happy to cooperate with the Scottish Green Party and other colleagues in Parliament who wish to tackle some of the online harm that is being propagated to individuals in our society. I've seen some of the messages that have been communicated by Elon Musk, promoting messages circulated by Tommy Robinson, encouraging people to take part in demonstrations in our country. It is absolutely abhorrent. And there needs to be the toughest regulatory regime in place. As Gillian Mackay says, the overwhelming majority of that is reserved to the United Kingdom Government, and we've had ongoing productive discussions with the UK Government as they wrestle with how to handle the expansion of social media and to have the correct regulatory environment in place. But if there are measures that we can take in this Parliament, then I assure Gillian Mackay of the appetite and the enthusiasm of the Government to make sure that we can take whatever steps are available to us to do exactly that.
Russell Findlay.
Thank you, President Officer. Before I start, I also want to say, come on Scotland, and let's at least get into the next round out the group stages. And I also want to wholeheartedly, on behalf of my party, condemn the ugly scenes that we saw in the streets of my home city of Glasgow. Now, John Swinney has blocked a parliamentary inquiry into the SNP crime scandal. He doesn't want to know if Peter Murrow stole taxpayers' money, the terms of his plea deal, or why Nicola Sturgeon wasn't prosecuted. A lady called Margaret Killa joined the SNP in the 1950s, and she donated money to the party for years. And when she died aged 84, she left them £20,000. Peter Murrow told Margaret's solicitor to deal only with him, not the party treasurer. Margaret's executor told me this morning that she would have backed an inquiry in Parliament. She said, and I quote, "Margaret truly believed in the SNP and would have been so upset and so angry, we'll never know if Peter Murrow stole her money." So why is John Swinney so scared of doing the right thing?
First Minister.
First of all, President Officer, I'd like to welcome the comments that Russell Findlay has made about the disorder in Glasgow, because I think it says something very significant that the Conservative leader, along with other leaders in Parliament, is reinforcing the comments that have been made, and I unreservedly welcome that support from the Conservative benches today. In relation to the points on the embezzlement case that has affected my party and my party alone, I appreciate and value the contributions that are made to my party by its members. It's been at the heart of my response to this incredibly distressing experience. And that is why I am taking action, and if the Presiding Officer will forgive me, this is out with my responsibilities as First Minister, but they are part of my responsibilities as the principal trustee of the Scottish National Party to make sure that the losses that we have experienced are repaid. That is why I've taken the action that I've taken in relation to, in concert with the approval of my National Executive Committee, to secure the return of those monies and to do that at the earliest possible opportunity, because of the commitment and the devotion of individuals who have given us money and who will feel injured by it. And of course, I am one of those people as well. I donate to the Scottish National Party, and I want that money to be used to take forward the activities of the SNP and the cause of Scottish independence. And that's why I've acted as the principal trustee of the party to make sure that that money is returned to where it rightfully belongs, in the funds of the Scottish National Party.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. Margaret Keller lived in Aberdeen South, where people will choose a new MP next week. Now, many of the residents I've been speaking with are dismayed by the SNP's desperate Peter Murrow and Nicola Sturgeon cover-up. But they are even more angry at the SNP's duplicity over oil and gas. Thousands of jobs are being lost because of Ed Miliband's idiotic opposition to new drilling. And the SNP pretend to back oil and gas, but they still have a presumption against new drilling in the North Sea. So will John Swinney get off the fence and back our candidate, Douglas Lumsden's clear call to get Britain drilling again?
Even Mr Finlay smiled at that one. First Minister.
About the only moment of significance that I've heard anything about Douglas Lumsden is the fact that he put in thousands of AI-generated questions to the Parliament. He couldn't even think them up for himself. So that tells you how useless Douglas Lumsden is, so nobody should think about voting for a useless candidate who can't make up his own questions.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, can I echo the remarks about the Scotland World Cup side and wish Steve Clarke and his squad all the best in the Americas. In relation to the violence that we have seen on Scottish streets in recent days, the heat and the hate stoked by bad actors online and amplified by voices in this chamber do not reflect the welcoming and internationalist country that I recognise. If they seek to gain advantage by trying to divide the people of Scotland, then they underestimate the people of Scotland, and they will fail. Presiding Officer, a leading education expert warned this week of a persistent and worsening shortage of specialist teachers in Scottish schools. This isn't just an education crisis, it's an economic one as well. And the Scottish Liberal Democrats are publishing today new research. This shows that over 500 teaching jobs had to be re-advertised due to shortages. Posts have been left unfilled for as long as 2 years. And in Kirkwall, the maths teacher post was re-advertised 14 times. Subjects like science, computing and technology are the very industries of the future. So, First Minister, why on earth are they being taught by history teachers or being dropped entirely?
First Minister.
First of all, let me welcome the comments that Mr Cole-Hamilton made in relation to the issues of division and disorder, and I welcome, but I'm not surprised by the comments that he made, so I welcome those. In relation to teaching numbers and specialist teachers in schools, there are acute challenges, particularly in rural Scotland, about the filling of teaching vacancies and in general. And then when that comes to specialist teaching posts, it becomes more acute. And the Government has, of course, in place mechanisms to try to encourage the taking up of those teaching posts, and that's part of the active workforce planning arrangements that we have in place. We also have other educational mechanisms which are available, particularly the eSchool, which was a digitally based platform which enables live teaching on subjects around the country, which are designed to address some of the shortages that Mr Cole-Hamilton refers to, where we are unable to take forward the filling of all of those vacancies. But the Government works with local authorities to take forward the workforce planning activity to ensure that we have a full and comprehensive network of teaching personnel in every part of the country.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
The First Minister is quick to lean into the likes of eSchool, but it requires far more support than the Government is currently providing it. Presiding Officer, I'm not sure the First Minister fully understands just how depressing this is for new teachers, to come out of training and have to head to the likes of Dubai or Darwin for a job because they can't find one here. It makes no sense. On the one hand, we have teachers who can't find jobs, and on the other, subjects are being cut due to lack of teachers. One practical way we could fill these vacancies is to make it much easier for primary school teachers to re-qualify and go to work in our secondary schools. Indeed, the General Teaching Council said this was a very practical solution for employers to address specific recruitment issues. Scotland's young people deserved the right to study whatever they want, wherever they are. So will the First Minister instruct his government to sit down with the Liberal Democrats and teaching bodies to deliver sensible solutions like this?
First Minister.
As I understand it, there is work already underway with the General Teaching Council on exactly the point that Mr Cole-Hamilton raises. So if there's additional input that is to come from the Liberal Democrats, then the Education Secretary will be happy to engage on that question, because we have to explore all practical steps. Mr Cole-Hamilton said that teachers were leaving the country to go to teach in Dubai or other locations and couldn't find jobs in Scotland, but he was pressing me about teaching vacancies in Scotland. So there's a slight contradiction there in the argument that there are plenty of teaching opportunities that are available, and we will work with individuals to try to ensure that is the case. I'm not quite sure what point Mr Cole-Hamilton is making to me when I sort of spell out the logic or the illogicality at the heart of his question, but I'll leave that for Mr Cole-Hamilton to study the record and to work out where we're going here. But I'm very keen to make sure that every available teacher is able to be deployed in Scottish education, and the Education Secretary will work happily with others to make sure that's the case.
Thank you, First Minister. That concludes First Minister's questions. I have to say I was disappointed by the lack of ambition in terms of Scotland's World Cup campaign. Last 16, last 32. Come on, everyone. Point of order, Helen McDade.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Under Standing Order 7.3, I'm learning. So the last time I learned I need to know the Standing Order. This time I learn I need to wait to the end of First Minister's questions. Thank you, Presiding Officer. Under orderly manner and should not conduct themselves in a manner which would constitute a criminal offence. The First Minister believes that saying the word strangers institutes violence. So what does he think the word racist aimed at me does to my risk? And I think it increases the risk I am at as a public figure. And so I am asking the presiding officer to rule on the word racist in this Parliament, or ask the First Minister, who's known me for 20 years, to say to my face he thinks I'm a racist.
I'm not aware of the First Minister being specific to any individual, but that's a point of argument, not a point of order. Members are responsible for their own contributions to the Chamber. Excuse me, don't. When I'm speaking, don't heckle when I'm answering. It's not actually a point of procedure, which is actually what a point of order should be. It's a point of argument, not a point of procedure. And as I've already said, that concludes First Minister's questions. We now move to the next item, which is a statement by Angela Constance on improving maternity services across Scotland. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, and there will be no interventions or interruptions. We have a 2-minute break to enable a changeover of the front benches.
Could members who intend to leave the chamber do so quietly so we can move on to next business? Thank you. I call on Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, this Government is determined to ensure the maternity services provided across our country meet the highest of standards for all women and their families. The core principles of safety and choice must remain at the very heart of this. I know members will share my deep concern about recent reports on maternity services, including last week's Healthcare Improvement Scotland inspection report on the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital's maternity services. And my statement will respond to these findings and set out the further action we will now take nationally, including through an independent review of maternity services. I know that for women and their families, pregnancy and birth can be both exciting and worrying. Giving birth in Scotland is, in the vast majority of cases, very safe, and our NHS staff are highly skilled. Any woman who is pregnant should always access care. Women generally report positive experiences. The National Childbirth Trust recent study From Expectation to Reality found that 87% of surveyed new mums in Scotland said they received good quality care. Today's Embrace UK audit report on UK perinatal deaths of babies born in 2024 shows Scotland had the lowest rate of all 4 UK nations. That said, I have heard the concerns shared by women, their families and members of this chamber, and one poor experience is one too many. Care must be safe, compassionate and of the highest quality, regardless of where or when women give birth. Ministers have already laid some important groundwork needed to address the challenges facing maternity services, but it's clear much more remains to be done. Last year, Healthcare Improvement Scotland began a rigorous programme of inspections of maternity units instigated by this Government. These inspections are independent of Government and are conducted wholly unannounced. Last week's HIS report into the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital identified serious issues, particularly in relation to women's experience of birth and access to timely, personalised care. Inspectors reported delays in triaging to labour wards and instances of failures to provide interpretation services where they were needed. And I find these issues unacceptable, and I have made that very clear to the Chief Executive of NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. And I expect all of Healthcare Improvement Scotland's 26 requirements to be taken forward urgently, and Ministers will be meeting the Board's Chief Executive again before recess to review progress. Whilst the report identifies failures, it also highlights kind care delivered to women, babies and their families, demonstrating the dedication of maternity staff. And I will shortly meet Jackie Lambert, Director of the Royal College of Midwives, to discuss the concerns of the workforce and to reiterate my thanks for the exceptional dedication of midwives. Members will also recall his inspection report of the Royal Infirmary Edinburgh maternity unit last year. And progress within NHS Lothian is positive. 24 of the 26 HIS requirements have been delivered, with the Board launching a maternity culture charter and recruiting new staff. However, NHS Lothian maternity services remain escalated under the framework we have for supervision, and will continue to work with the Board to ensure they meet all of HIS's requirements and recommendations. With 7 of the 18 HIS inspections completed, common themes are emerging. These include inconsistent approaches to maternity triage, delays in induction of labour, workforce pressures, concerns around governance and culture, and failures to consistently meet core mandatory training requirements. And each of the boards inspected by HIS has submitted a detailed action plan setting out how they will address the issues identified, and they will be held to account for delivering on those commitments. It is clear, nonetheless, that decisive national action is needed to tackle the issues we are seeing again and again in different parts of the country. And that work has already begun. Firstly, we commissioned HIS to develop standards describing the level of service expected in every maternity unit. These were published in March, and HIS will incorporate the new standards into their inspection programme from September. Last year, we published an action plan to address racialised health inequalities, and this provides boards with clear actions to take to improve the care provided in perinatal services. We have developed a delivery framework for miscarriage care to make sure women and their families receive the compassionate care they need at the right time in settings that meet their needs. Our triage working group is producing a target operating model that describes how maternity triage services should look in small, medium and large units and in rural and urban communities. Work has also been taken forward to support the sustainability of the maternity workforce through our Nursing and Midwifery Task Force, including improving recruitment pathways, retention and workforce wellbeing. And Minister Marie Todd will take forward work to develop a rural midwifery apprenticeship. While those actions are important, they will not be sufficient, and that is why we have committed to an independent review of maternity services in Scotland. And this review will draw on inspection findings, but we cannot wait for HIS's programme of inspections to conclude next year before it gets underway. That is why today I have published the core principles of the review, and I will outline these to members now. Firstly, the review will consider whether we have the right maternity services in place to meet the changing needs of women and families. Women are increasingly having children later in life, and more women are entering pregnancy with complex health needs. And these factors can have a significant impact on the care required during pregnancy and birth. And this review will provide a strategic assessment of need that will help us match our services to our population. The review will be forward-looking and consider service sustainability, taking account of workforce culture, safety, quality and equity of access. The review will consider maternity services in rural and island areas and the experiences of women living there. And I have heard very clearly, particularly from Marie Todd, David Green, Finlay Carson and Laura Mitchell, of the strength of feeling in Caithness, Wigtonshire and Elgin. And I know progress has been made in meeting our commitment to Dr Grace Hospital in Elgin, and I want to ensure that that progress continues. This review will look at the experiences of women in Caithness, Wigtonshire and Elgin, and in other rural and island communities. The review will consider inequalities in outcomes, including the higher maternal mortality rates experienced by Black and Asian women, and will assess whether current work to tackle racialised inequalities is achieving the impact required. And this will be informed by the voices of Black and Asian women. Lastly, the review will consider how NHS boards engage with their local communities on the decisions that they make about maternity services, and I know that this has been a key issue raised by Scotland's Patient Safety Commissioner. Presiding Officer, this work will demand an experienced and trusted chair, and I am therefore very pleased to announce that this review will be chaired by Professor Christine McCourt. Christine McCourt is Professor of Maternal and Child Health at City St George's, University of London. Her wide-ranging expertise includes focusing on the experience of women, informed choice in care, place of birth, induction of labour, group care and continuity of carer, and on approaches to improve equity, quality and safety in care. She is a trusted leader in the UK in maternal health and is well placed to lead the transformation that we need to see. Professor McCourt will engage with women, families, patient groups, clinicians, midwives, nurses and the wider maternity workforce across Scotland, including in Caithness and Wigtonshire. It is essential that the voices of those receiving and delivering care are heard directly through this process. I will also ask Professor McCourt to examine service models and make robust evidence-based recommendations on the best possible clinical pathways to ensure women are safe when they give birth and that their needs and those of their families are met. Pace is essential, and I expect the review to be commenced after summer and be completed within 9 months, and we will publish a more detailed scope and terms of reference in due course. And to ensure that Parliament is fully involved in this work, I will ask Professor McCourt to host a cross-party meeting before she begins the review. Presiding Officer, I want to close by providing reassurance today to women that they will be heard. Welcoming a new arrival to the world is the most precious and special moment, and women must be able to trust the services being provided to them. And this independent review is about ensuring women can have the confidence that this government will take swift action where it is needed. This not only delivers on our 100 days commitment, but importantly will deliver real and tangible change for women, their babies and their families. Thank you.
The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in the statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, after which we will move on to the next item of business. It would be helpful if members who wish to ask a question were to press the request to speak buttons now. I've had indications from 13 members that they wish to ask a question to the Cabinet Secretary, and to enable all of those questions to be put and to be answered, this will require both questions and answers to be brief. Jackie Bailey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's statement and welcome the appointment of Professor Christine McCourt. She has her work cut out for her. Inspections have revealed the significant delays for women waiting to be induced in Glasgow, others forced to travel 100 miles to give birth in Caithness, and shortages of midwives in Lothian as examples. Parents who lost babies, though, are frustrated by the lack of transparency. Promises were made previously that parents like Julie Keegan, who lost her baby boy, and Laurie Quate, who lost both his wife and unborn child, would be part of the task force. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary why they've not been involved? And only this week we learned of further delays to the opening of the Bed Family Hospital, which of course provides maternity services. It's 7 years late. And then there's the downgrading of the award-winning Wishaw neonatal unit. And consideration of neonatal services appears to have been dropped. It would be helpful to know if the Cabinet Secretary would reconsider. And finally, Presiding Officer, in my constituency, midwives and expectant mothers are concerned by reports that triage calls currently dealt with by their local hospital, the Vale of Leven, could be centralised. So what steps will the Minister take to ensure that women giving birth receive safe, high-quality care wherever they are in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I'll do my best to answer those points in turn and also try and achieve brevity. Jackie Bailey.